General Adro's booming voice echoed through the command deck upon his arrival. "What madness consumes you, General?" he bellowed, his eyes ablaze with disbelief. "Ah, Ambassador, splendid of you to grace us with your presence," smirked the officer, unfazed by Adro's fury. "Wouldn't want you to miss the spectacle." "Spectacle?" Adro retorted, incredulous. "Have you lost your mind, General? Have my reports meant nothing to you?" The elder Nagoon's snort reverberated through the room as he abandoned the control console, rising to his full towering height. Ambassador Adro, though once filled with indignation, now felt a sense of trepidation wash over him. General Bruld, a behemoth of their species, stood a formidable 250 centimeters tall, dwarfing the diplomat by a meter. It wasn't just his size that commanded respect. His massive arms and legs spoke of strength capable of tearing through steel. His body, encased in red and black uniform, bore the rugged exterior of smoothed bone chips, resembling ancient stone formations. There were just enough gaps between them to not limit mobility, but not enough to provide an enemy with an opening should the general's defensive reflexes kick in. If attacked, the muscle and skin underneath this outer layer would tense and contract, pulling the shards together into a solid layer of natural armor that could shrug off most blows and shrapnel. All Noggin had this carapace, of course, though only the warrior caste boasted so much of it. Those of the scholar caste, like Ambassador Adro, only had patches and spatterings of them by comparison, exposing much of the light gray skin underneath. In the diplomat's case, it was only his knuckles, elbows, knees, neck, and back of his skull that had enough density to offer any meaningful protection. None of those were visible under his hooded dark blue robe. A few speckles of off-white could be seen around the edges of his 4 eyes, and several pointy protrusions jutted out from his chin, but other than that, his face was completely exposed. This allowed the general to get a good look of the lesser man's fear-filled expression. His own emotions were far more difficult to read since his features were almost completely encased, making him resemble a talking sculpture. However, subtle body languages and twitches betrayed a mix of anger and annoyance. Any Nagun could pick up on those micro-expressions, though the officer wasn't making even the slightest effort to disguise his emotions. "You dare question my sanity?" he spoke, following his aggressive snort. "Deepest, humblest apologies, General." Adro cowered. "I was merely overcome with shock when I heard what you intended. Please, forgive me." "Humph." The officer's ire deflated, and he returned to his seat. The matter concerned the alien delegation currently aboard the ship. It was extremely rare to find another sapient species sailing the stars. In the Nagun's entire space-faring history, this had only happened 4 times, and each encounter ultimately ended the same way. The aliens were brought into the fold of one of their empires, mostly through force. Over the next dozen generations, their culture, language, technology, and biology would be adapted and molded to fit the Nagans. The end result was a new Castia hybrid species that excelled in a certain field or purpose. Scholars like Adro were the first of such total conversions, and their expertise with technology ensured those that followed would be much smoother and far less rebellious. It also afforded the diplomats some measure of superiority over the entertainer, explorer, and builder castes, though warriors like the general were the highest elite. They were the descendants of the original Nagan, who nearly nuked themselves into extinction before they were able to escape their now uninhabitable homeworld. The species as a whole had developed, branched, and matured immeasurably since, though their militaristic mindset ensured they would continue to war against each other. Diplomats like Adro could be found on nearly every battleship, frigate, and cruiser, and it was their job to ensure that meatheads like the general didn't start another civil war that might end with their kind's total annihilation. This first contact stuff, however, wasn't something the ambassador was prepared for. All he could do was try to wing it and ensure this new species accepted their new Nagun overlords without too much of a fuss. They would all prosper in the long run, though the star-spanning nation that this particular vessel belonged to would reap the most benefits. The new caste, whatever shape it took, would eventually spread to its competitors. But until then, the Collagen Union could enjoy a boom in population, productivity, and new technology. The general understood all this, which was why he was so eager to begin the assimilation and get his name into the history hollow books. A little too eager, perhaps. His long years of service had taught him that, when a scholar advised caution, it was wise to at least listen. I did look at your reports," he said with a snort, more irritated than angry. None of the information provided was cause for concern. Unless you made some kind of error? The newly discovered civilization called themselves humans, once the Nagun established communication with the aid of their explorer caste. This subspecies was even shorter and slimmer than the scholars, resembling malnourished younglings with exceptionally bulbous heads. They were the only Nagan offshoot to harness the power of their minds, achieving feats like telepathy and telekinesis with ease. The humans had some psionic potential that they had yet to tap into, which proved sufficient for the exchange of thoughts and ideas. With explorers serving as intermediary between scholar technicians and the humans' own engineers, the two species were able to establish a line of communication in mere days. Ambassador Adro had been there every step of the way, and was among the first to converse with these smooth skins, as they were initially called. They had the same general arrangement of limbs as all Nagun, which was a promising sign that their genetic assimilation would progress smoothly. Their intelligence was on par with scholars, yet their technology and weaponry were leagues behind as they were still their interstellar infancy. These traits were also seen as good omens. They implied humans were smart enough to realize that resistance was futile, and those that didn't would be wiped out swiftly. Indeed, initial projections showed the conquest of the humans as practically a done deal, and Ambassador Adro was the one make them, yet he was now seemingly second-guessing his own calculations. "I believe you may have misconstrued my words, General," the diplomat began explaining himself. "The earlier reports were of this group of humans in particular. We don't have much data on their species as a whole. I was busy compiling all we had so far of the wider picture when you, stepped in. Do you believe your initial assumptions are incorrect?" "Potentially, yes. The humans insisted they are peaceful, and I was inclined to agree. As am I," Bruld agreed. "It is evident in the state of their vessels. A fleet of 20 ships, yet their combined arms could only hope to cripple a single one of our 7 battleships before the rest were wiped out. A near flawless victory. This is true, but by their own admission, that is merely an exploratory force, General." "I am aware. Then have you considered how our own research expeditions are armed by comparison, and what the aliens' actual military was like if these were their scouts? In most cases, the explorer caste sent out a single gunship with most of her armaments, replaced with sensory and analytical equipment, leaving just enough firepower to fend off a pirate or two. A mere insect compared to the might of a battleship, let alone the 7 in this strike fleet. If the humans had even remotely the same level of escalation, they could instantly field an armada capable of competing against the entirety of the Collagen Union's navy, reserves included. That was a big if, but Bruld had not ignored it. "I see my wisdom matches your own, scholar. I have already anticipated what you imply. Though he wanted his name to echo across future generations, he would prefer it to be as a great leader rather than an overambitious fool. His younger self would have definitely dismissed the ambassador's concerns out of hand. But he wasn't that brash, glory-hungry moron anymore. He was well aware his advisors were there to make up for what he lacked, though in this case, his subordinate had underestimated him. And yet you still force the human delegation to fight against a sand beast for your entertainment? Calling such a barbaric act anything short of a diplomatic cluster mistake would be doing it a disservice. It was all but guaranteed to provoke an armed response, and if the ambassador's fears were proven true, the humans would come at them with everything they had, not just this expedition, but their civilization as a whole. History showed that, when forced into war, an alien's initial offensive was the strongest and warning-liest they could muster. They would eventually be pummeled into submission by the combined might of the Nagun's galaxy-spanning civilization, but the general and his subordinates, Adro included, would be space dust by then. Indeed, let us see exactly how peaceful these smooth skins truly are when forced to fight for their lives without their little toys. These toys were another thing that gave the diplomat pause. The sheer number of weapons the delegation's sole soldier brought along was rather excessive. Some kind of projectile-spewing rifle, two similar yet smaller sidearms, a titanium combat knife sharpened to a monomolecular edge, 8 hand-held explosive devices, and a bizarre suit of mechanized full-body armor. It was unheard of for Nagan warriors to carry so many different implements of death, as a single plasma cannon was deemed sufficient as far as personal arms went. It could put head-sized holes through any organic matter and most forms of cover. It was clunkier than the humans' weapons and its projectiles considerably slower, but it was designed with other Nagan warriors in mind. Their hides and carapace were so thick that anything less would be pointless, hence why they also had no need for armor in firefights. The only thing they wore were uniforms to show allegiance and regulate body temperature. On some of the more temperamental worlds out there, it then dawned on Adro that, perhaps, a human needed so much equipment because their soft and squishy bodies had no natural weapons or protection of their own. Scans showed that their muscles and bones boasted respectable density, so throwing a punch would probably cause some damage, but the extent of their physical abilities were still unknown. A cursory analysis of their biology revealed they had evolved with agility and grace, rather than raw power and endurance. They were far closer to the athletes and acrobats of the entertainer caste than the true-blooded Nagan. Such beings stood no chance against a warrior caste soldier in hand-to-hand combat, let alone a sand beast. It would slaughter them in seconds, which would confirm that their civilization truly was made up of harmless wimps that were easy pickings. Alternatively, if the 5 smooth skins managed to fend off the creature for a while, or maybe even slay it, then that would serve as evidence that they were more warlike than they let on. In the latter case, it would fall to the ambassador to figure out how to avoid this incident's escalation into immediate war. Adro was a clever man, so he was already thinking of ways to do that. Ideally, he'd never have to implement any of the ideas that came to him, but his gut feeling told him he'd be extraordinarily busy before long. "As you say, General," he conceded with a bow of his head. "Ha hrumph," Bruld snorted yet again, this time in satisfaction. "Come, take a seat. The bout will begin soon." The nearby screens showed live footage of the fighting pit in the bowels of the ship. Under normal circumstances, this was where warrior caste soldiers aired out their inherent aggression against one another. The square 20-meter arena was outfitted with life sign monitors that were programmed to watch for impending death or serious injury caused by an especially heated spar. In such cases, a stasis field generator would put the endangered combatant into a state of suspended animation that also prevented further harm. Energy weapons would punch right through this protection, of course, but these duels were done hand-to-hand as per Nagan tradition. Those customs were observed today as well, though the one-on-one rule didn't apply when facing a sand beast, or at least that's what these bone-covered four-eyed space gorillas called the creature. To Lieutenant Baker, the creature behind the cage on the other end of the arena reminded her of a mole crossed with a gecko. The lizard thing's torso was as big as an elephant, with a large serpentine head, practically no neck, a gaping maw full of needle-like teeth, and 4 short yet thick legs ending in some wide claws that looked perfect for burrowing. Some apex predator from the alien bastard's homeworld, no doubt. "They can't seriously expect us to fight that thing," someone whispered behind the lieutenant. "Just look at it. Easy, Gibbs," she reassured the engineer over her shoulder. "It's just a dumb lizard. I can handle it." "With what? They took all our gear. You gonna boop its snoot and hope it's friendly?" "Not a bad idea, actually." The brunette mulled it over. "Oh, we are so trapped." The other 3 members of the delegation shared Engineer Gibbs's grim outlook. Baker was the only one among these 5 with any training or experience in combat, and she had all her weapons and power armor confiscated by the Nagoon. The lying bastards had taken them all prisoner the instant their shuttle was docked. To make matters worse, this happened after all that effort Gibbs and his team went through to splice together that translation algorithm on such short notice. If he knew this was how it was going to turn out, he would have stalled to give the messenger time to return with proper government officials and diplomats. Then again, if he knew that, he wouldn't have agreed to the honor of being among the first humans on an alien spacecraft, and neither would his colleagues. One could hardly fault the eggheads for their enthusiasm. It had already been nearly a century since humanity unlocked the secrets of faster-than-light travel through wormhole generation and started spreading among the stars. Yet, despite traveling untold light years to thousands of worlds, very few of those harbored life, and none of it was sapient or even sentient. The discovery of spacefaring aliens was an incredible and momentous occasion. Unfortunately, humanity had yet to create a means of real-time FTL communication, so the only way to get the word out was to send someone back home. It would be at least a week before anyone else could make it here on the edge of Terran Confederacy space, and the expedition couldn't sit on its hands, so they took it upon themselves to establish first contact. A bunch of scientists, cartographers, and engineers weren't exactly qualified for that, but realistically, who was? Things started out promising enough. The Nagun were a wonderfully diverse bunch and seemed pleasant and civil, not to mention just as eager to make friends. They even took the initiative by sending over telepaths' actual psionics to help facilitate communication. The people in charge of the human expedition took this as a promising sign. After all, if these aliens meant harm, would they truly commit such a valuable resource as a mind reader to the extremely risky duty of being the first aboard a newfound species ships? Apparently they would, given the predicament that Lieutenant Baker's group were now in. Stripped of all of their equipment aside from their uniforms and rebreather masks, they were forced into this blood-soaked ring and given an ultimatum: fight or die. At least the alien atmosphere-air composition didn't cause any complications with the human eye or ear, though it was lacking in oxygen. The gravity was also within acceptable parameters, 23% stronger than the standard 9.8 ms2, though not enough to cause issues. Well, not for the lieutenant at least, and that was all that mattered at this point in time. Her senses weren't clouded, and her mobility wasn't impaired, so she could at least put on a good show for the bastards. She had no illusions about any of them making it out of here alive, even if she defeated the mole snake and escaped this arena. Those massive firearms the space gorillas touted felt like they'd liquefy her, armor and all, and even if she got in too close for them to fire, they'd still make good bludgeoning weapons. Despite all that, she was determined to at least give the bony bastards a black eye, just as soon as she was done whooping this freaky thing in front of her. The commando had just enough time to psych herself up and get her adrenaline implant going before both her cage and the monsters were opened. The walls behind them started moving, shoving all combatants into the arena whether they liked it or not. "Stay behind me and out of my way," Baker told the others. This could get messy. The sand beast on the other side started creeping closer, a wide forked tongue tasting the air. Or, so the lieutenant imagined at first. The whole convergent evolution thing went over her head, but she was loosely aware of the concept after encountering quite a few familiar beasties on some of the colonies with indigenous fauna. Those experiences also taught her not to assume anything based on a creature's appearance, so she did her best to curb her expectations. She started circling to her left, her stance and footwork reminiscent of a boxer in the opening seconds of a round. The snake-headed beast matched her movements, taking long and steady sidesteps as it regarded the slightly bouncing creature with a half-hiss, half-growl. The way the other four sheepishly cowered as they moved to remain behind their guardian served to confuse it as well. So far, the sand beast had only ever fought teams of Nagan warriors, and their kind charged directly at it the instant the cage was open. These smaller, softer creatures' cautious approach made them seem like easier prey, though the beast's instincts warned it of a hidden danger. Seeing as the monster wasn't as aggressive as she imagined it to be, Baker decided to make a move. She lowered her guard, stopped hopping on her toes, and approached it with slow, measured steps, while her companions held their breath. "You're not so mean, are you, big fella?" She spoke softly. "You don't look hungry either. I bet you don't really want to fight for those mean, bony bastards, do you?" The sand beast seemed taken in by her demeanor and looked at her, with curiosity as she drew near. It lowered its enormous body and stubby neck to study the human closer. The aggression and wariness it sensed earlier were gone like a bad dream, replaced by a gentle sensation it hadn't felt since it was a hatchling. Though feral, it wasn't a complete moron. It was dimly aware that a fight here would be pointless. Its captors would keep it alive no matter what, and it only attacked them because of the overwhelming hostility they radiated. So, when presented with kindness for the first time in years, it couldn't help but be enthralled by the smooth skin. "Huh, you're actually kinda cute up close." The woman slowly extended an open hand, as if to boop its snoot, as Gibbs put it. Unfortunately, the animal saw this motion in the wrong light and lashed out. Its neck extended, and its maw snapped closed on the human with the intent of biting her in half at the waist. The sudden motion elicited screams from the others, but the sand beast couldn't afford to pay them any mind. Its surprise attack, despite all the speed and power behind it, had failed. It felt two very small, very firm grips around its needle, like teeth keeping both upper and lower jaw from sinking into anything. Despite outwardly showing a vulnerable side, Baker was ready to come under attack at any moment, and managed to defend herself. Her knuckles went white around those pointy fangs. Her muscles bulged under her skin-tight bodysuit, and she felt her bones creak from the immense pressure, but she firmly held its maw open. Terran commandos had intensive cybernetic augmentations that greatly enhanced their combat abilities. Strength, durability, speed, and reflexes were boosted to superhuman levels, allowing the lieutenant to stop the truck-sized creature's bite with room to spare. She was unharmed, though she could do without the less than pleasant experience of getting a face full of rancid breath and slimy saliva. "Calm down, big guy." Her voice was still quiet and calm. "Just let me go, okay? Nice and easy, there you go." Taken in by her level tone and gentle nudgings, the sand beast slowly opened its maw and pulled back its head. The instant the lieutenant was clear of danger, she leapt a full 2 meters up to its face. In the next instant, she took a sharp swing at a potential weak spot her ocular implants had identified, on the side of the head just above its right eye. "Bad!" She screamed at the top of her lungs, just as her left hook collided with a satisfying crunch. Despite her much smaller stature, the pinpoint blow had enough force behind it to send the sand beast reeling as if shot with a fist-sized bullet. The creature stumbled a few steps to the side before collapsing in a dazed heap. Baker approached its spinning eye with a huff and used the same left she just decked it with to point at the ground between them. "Now stay!" Though the creature didn't know her words, the commanding tone ringing in its skull made their meaning loud and clear. It rolled over on its side and exposed its vulnerable underside in an unmistakable sign of submission. "That's more like it. Who's a good boy?" She rubbed its soft belly scales with a wide smile while the rest of her delegation looked on, absolutely flabbergasted. They were aware of her modifications, but this was the first time any of them had actually seen her in action. The Nagan observers up on the command deck were even more surprised. Did that human just tame a sand beast? It would appear so, General, Adro confirmed. By hitting it in the head, there was more to it, but yes. What? This makes no sense. Cybernetic augmentation was a concept that the Nagoon weren't familiar with. They enhanced their soldiers, of course, but it was through genetic manipulation. Prosthetics were similarly unknown since lost limbs were regenerated rather than replaced. As such, the Nagoon couldn't help but assume that the metallic components and heightened bioelectric readings caught by their initial scans were natural. They were informed Lieutenant Baker was a Terran commando, which they understood as the human's warrior caste equivalent. The general's soldiers boasted traits and organs that his civilian subordinates could not, so he assumed Baker's abnormalities were simply part of her specialized genome. However, now that he witnessed the augmented human in action, the origins of her machine parts were the last thing the general was concerned about. A warrior that strong, how is she a mere grunt? And why would she permit an enemy to live after it attacked first? With lethal intent, too. Even in his prime, Bruld could never hope to defeat a sand beast by himself. The same went for the rest of the warriors under his command, who only challenged it in groups of 3 at the least. Yet not only did this woman do it alone, she also beat it into submission with a single blow. It was as unbelievable as a rookie entertainer's play aimed at impressionable younglings, yet had transpired before his very eyes. Though, as his advisor stated, there was more to the subjugation than excessive force. As I said, the humans described themselves as peaceful, Adro stressed. Not harmless. Speak plainly. Those words are synonyms to us, but not to them. A creature humans deem harmless is physically unable to hurt or injure them. The scholar gestured at the on-screen sand beast, which seemed to be enjoying its belly rubs. They reserved the term peaceful for something notably different. Adro shifted his hand towards the human next to it, who shot an unquestionably vicious look at the hidden camera. Something that is capable of horrendous acts of violence, yet chooses not to employ them. I see. Then, for all our sakes, I hope you have an idea how to smooth things over with the human delegation. A few, yes. They would show the humans that the arena was wired with life monitors and stasis fields. The general had no intention of activating the latter, but their presence would help convince their guests that they were never in real danger. The Nagun hadn't told them about this safety net because this entire thing was a test of their character to see if they shared a sense of honor and courage, similar to the Nagun's own, which they passed with flying colors. That story had some elements of truth to it, but was largely. The scholar desperately hoped the smooth skins would buy it, and, to his great fortune, they did. The humans still felt slighted, of course, but allowing the baker woman to keep her new pet, which she named Herbert, while still in the ring, had been judged sufficient compensation. As a result of General Bruhl's initiative and Ambassador Adros' assistance, the Council of Elders would spend a full year conducting a thorough investigation of humanity, after which they arrived at a monumental decision. For the first time in their 2 millennia-long interstellar history of conquest, the Nagun chose to ally with an alien species rather than invite disaster by attempting assimilation. Well guys, if you liked this video and want a particular HFY story, comment below with its title. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. But most important, leave a comment. Until the next video.